been having your daughters for the thing to make sure that it's actually recording. Oh, there we go. All right. Woo! I love it.
What the hell?
Huh?
To grant Skype permission to share your screen, go to, hold on. Apparently I got to do something on my end now. Settings, privacy.
Oh, okay.
Security and privacy. You let me go on porn sites. Now you care about Skype? What the fuck?
Oh, hell.
About as confusing as my last marriage, man. Shit.
Right?
All right. Let's see here. Screen sharing. Wait, Skype will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it's quit. You can choose to quit Skype now or do it.
I don't know. You know, we can give it a try. If it doesn't record, we can always try it another day when you're not busy. But on my end, it says it's recording.
Okay. We'll just try it later. As long as I'm showing up on the screen, I guess we're good.
Yeah, I think we're there.
All right.
All right.
All right, brother.
All right. Well, welcome, guys, to another episode of Stand 2 with Nesto. Today's guest is Nick Garber, comic book artist extraordinaire, amongst other things. I am not even going to try to get through this entire curriculum vitae that you sent me, bro. I'm going to hit on some on the greatest hits here. So let's see. Obviously, you started your career with 2nd Rangers up at Fort Lewis. Rangers
yes, sir.
Away. That's awesome. You know, that was the one Ranger battalion I actually tried to join, and I couldn't get there because I wasn't an E5 when I first tried to re-enlist. And then I said, no, thanks. I'm a big, fat, lazy boy who just wants to be a grunt. So
everybody wants to go to because it's the farthest away from the flagpole from regiment, from the headquarters.
Oh, I can imagine.
I didn't know that. I wanted to stay on the West Coast, but had I known about, well, I knew about First Bat there in Savannah. Had I known how close their proximity was to the beach as a unit, I probably would have gone First Bat.
And Savannah beaches aren't nothing to shake a stick at, dude. Those are nice.
Oh, they aren't too, man. I was like, I went over there to just to visit one of my buddies, and I was like, this is where you're, man, I fucked up. You got this awesome beach. I get to stare at Mount Rainier all the time or climb it, right. You know,
and freeze my ass off in Yakima.
God, I've way too many cold mornings there. Yeah.
Oh, God, I only went to Yakima once with the 25th, man, and I was like, y'all can have that. I never want to see it again. You know, and I've been to the northern part. I've been to Hokkaido, Japan with the 25th, and I'd rather go there than Yakima.
The only good thing about Yakima is that you can just destroy everything there and nobody's going to bat an eye.
No, there'll be celebrations, bro. If Yakima would be wiped off the map, people would celebrate. I can guarantee it. But so you went on from there to be a team leader with B Company of 1st Battalion's 5th Infantry. Then from there, I'm assuming is where you. Oh no, because it says here you did. I thought you were commissioned before we went to Iraq.
No, actually, it was after about 3 years after. I was when we deployed to Iraq. Yeah, I was an E5 and I got promoted to staff sergeant while I was there.
Nice.
It was when we got back from the San Diego fires in 2007. I got approached by, well, I guess now he's Lieutenant Colonel Riley. He was Captain Riley at the time. He goes, "Hey Nick, you got your degree, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's in graphic art design. Why?" He goes, "Well, you want to cross over?" I'm like, "Whoa. What do you mean crossover?" He's like, "What do you want to go to OCS?" And I'm like, "As long as it's the active duty school, I ain't doing that 2-week, 18-month National Guard bullshit."
Right.
He's like, no, active duty school. I'm like, all right, three months of me getting my teeth kicked in. Do I get to stay a grunt? And he's like, absolutely. And I'm like, oh, fuck it, sign me up. I had just made the E7 list. I was ready to go to an admin career, and I like door kicking. So I was still young enough. I think I was like 27, 28, something like that. Getting ready to turn 29. I was like, I'll extend my door kicking days, lead a platoon. That'd be awesome. Let's see if I can back up what I've been saying all these years. I'm like, man, any fucking goofball can be a fucking platoon leader.
Well, you know, we weren't going to say it. I'm glad you did.
No, I fucking said it. Shit, I even said it even after I was commissioned. You know, it's like, there's nothing worse than despising your own kind. But I guess then again, being an officer was really not being, it wasn't my own kind. That's not where I come from. You know, I did it just to extend, you know, leading troops, which was my favorite thing about the military is, you know, is having that hands-on experience in leading troops. I may have been a little bit more hands-on than most platoon leaders, but I also gave my platoon sergeant, my squad leaders, and their team leaders their space to, you know, to operate, and I was there to guide. But I liked being on the ground with my boys, you know. Yeah. Probably, shit. That's the coolest experience ever. You know, I thought being a squad leader or a team leader was badass, but being a platoon leader and then being a Bradley platoon leader, now I got tanks to deal with, little mini tanks. That was definitely cool. And I was like, okay, I made the right choice. And my fallback was, hey, if I don't like it, I just resign my commission. I go back to being a staff sergeant. No harm, no foul.
Absolutely. That's always kind of been something that I've been curious about. The whole resigning the commission bit. How does that work, and what kind of, I mean, is that like a black mark on the record? I mean, I've been enlisted my entire career. I was enlisted, dude, so no clue.
It is and it isn't. It makes your superior officers, like, once you do that, because I've known a few guys that have just said, you know what, I'm tired of the officer bullshit. I'm tired of the politics. I just want to lead troops, you know.
Right.
So when they resign, they usually move to another unit, you know, kind of get a blank slate, a clean slate, if you will. And it really doesn't seem to be a problem, but it does make captains and above nervous, because here's a guy that just they don't quite comprehend, and it's usually because they're ring knockers or they're ROTC Nazis, and they're not Mustangs. Your Mustangs will definitely understand. They're like, dude, I totally get it, man. Yeah, but your true blue officers, they're not going to get it, and it scares them. They're like, why would this guy do that? Why would he give up this commission? This is the life, you know, up here where the air is crisp. Why do you want to be there with, you know, the beer drinking creep? You know, and they're over there like Prometheus going, instead of bringing them fire to the masses, they're like, I have brought them Jameson.
Yes.
They're no longer drinking PBR or Natty Light. I have brought them a gift of our kind, Jameson. You know, whiskey. And the infantry was forever changed.
Their pellets. They are no longer ground rollers. Oh, I understand.
Yeah. I have made them refined bastards, you know.
Oh, but again, do they drink with the pinky out, though? That's the important part.
Well, and that's always what gave me away, too, because while those little ring knockers were drinking with their pinky out, doing their Emily Post shit, I'm over there like, what?
Right.
You got anything stronger?
Well, because I remember, I mean, obviously, you know, what was General Order number 1 in Iraq? No alcohol. But what was the first thing we did? Yeah. What any good? What was that?
When we were roof parties, we would drink on the roof.
Oh, hell yeah.
Like when we were bailing out, you know, heading to BIOP for the Freedom Bird home, we flew over the HHC barracks, and all you saw on the top of the stairwell roof was just like bottles of empty booze bottles. I'm like,
oh man,
I wish I had my camera out. I wish I would have known the flight path, because I would have loved to have taken a picture of that. I'm like, fuck General Order 1.
Right? No, that was crazy, man. I mean, I loved being a little part of that that little shall we call it speakeasy mentality in Iraq, getting that stuff through the gates and stuff and bringing it in. I remember
the first time I was nervous, but like nobody searched your shit. They just it was so easy to get it on.
Right? No, I loved it. I remember the first time that I actually tried to get anything was when they had us on gate guard for that month, and I was trying to and I was trying to talk to this old goat herder dude that kept walking past, and I'm trying to get him like, hey, whiskey. I'm showing him dollars. And I made the mistake of what was it? Habibi, I think is what I called him. And so dude comes the next day, dude, gives me the normal kisses, right? And then grabs me by the hand, dude, and takes me around the corner. And I'm thinking, dude, what the fuck is this guy thinking is going to happen?
Fiki.
Right? I was like, hell no. But the dude just was taking me around the corner and brought out, some bottles of whiskey that he had bought. But man, I was nervous. I was like, fuck, is the whiskey worth it? I don't know. How many months were we in at that point?
Okay. A long time. I mean, Colonel Fry caught me in the green zone grabbing a bottle.
Oh, damn.
He caught me, like red fucking handed, like bottle in hand, shoving it into my fucking assault pack. And he's like, Nick, what are you doing? Sir, I'm not even going to lie. I got a bottle of whiskey. And he's like, well, goddamn, boy, let me see what you got. And they didn't have the good shit. All they had was like, I mean, nothing wrong with Jack Daniels, but it's not a sipping whiskey. Like you shoot it and you have a back with it, because right. It is goddamn fucking hellfire. So he sees it and he's like, I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. General Order 1 does not preclude me from purchasing alcohol. It just precludes me from consuming said alcohol. And he goes, well, come by the office around 2100 when we get back. We'll break General Order 1 together. And I'm like, fuck, really?
Nice.
And he goes, yeah, and bring the boys.
I thought he was a good guy.
Oh, he was. I've had some awesome leaders in my career, and I think he's up there. He's like definitely in the top 3 of just officers that I've served under that just got it. They understood their men. Even at the lowest level. Like, I mean, you couldn't walk around the FOB without him knowing just about every fucking Joe's name.
Right.
And I'd never seen that in an officer before. That was something that I tried to emulate. Knowing everybody within my unit, especially underneath my charge. Right. Got a little tougher when I was a company commander, because then there's like 140 fucking people I got to know. But I did my best, he was the model for my officer career, actually. And then, combined with some of the great officers that I had in Ranger Regiment and in the 25th, I took what I wanted to take for the tool bag, the stuff that worked, stuff I knew would work. And then I left the rest at the door.
Well, I got to say, that's one of the things that I've always admired about Mustangs, because, I mean, you guys do bring the NCO mentality of tactical thinking to what's more a strategic realm. And a lot of officers never can bridge that gap. And that's why you pair 18, 21-year-old lieutenants with salty-ass platoon sergeants, get them squared away. Which I know that I've filled this really weird gap, because I didn't even join the Army until I was 21. So you got an E2 private walking around that's got 3 years on his peers and is the age of most of his, team leaders plus his LT and whatnot, similar life experience, and then plus my background and having lived in so many different countries and cultures and shit, that it was, throughout my career, a lot of people didn't know how to treat me. I mean, even wearing specialist rank, people still calling me sergeant and whatnot. I'm like, Well,
I know it sounds weird, but I mean, we're talking about a young man's game. So even if you come in at 21, now you're an assault dog, Yeah. And a lot of people will lean on that 3 years of experience, even if it's not military experience. They're like, oh my God, you did things for like 3 years before you joined the military. What was that like? What experiences did you gain? And it was like the opposite for me. Like, I joined at 17, and then I got out of active duty and I went straight to college as a 22-year-old fucking grunt that had been around the world and seen some shit and done some things, And I'm sitting there in a college class, and probably about the second week, I started bringing like 6-packs to my class. there was no rule against it, you know. So
Right.
I'm sitting there and, you know, History 305 or whatever, talking about the Spanish-American War, and I reach inside and I would take my assault pack too. So my green one that has my name on the back, it's got fucking dirt from like 5 different nations still crusted on there, and I just reach in there and Mr. Garber, is that a beer? Yeah, I got one if you want it. Okay. No, because I just didn't give a fuck. I was there to learn, you know?
Yeah. What the fuck are you going to do to me? It's like,
these 19-year-old kids are like, I'm like, yeah, and I had a big fat fucking sip in. So after I drank the beer, and then it was my spitter for the rest of the class. Just like,
that's awesome. Well, let's switch gears up a little bit because, you know, I do want to get into what you're doing now. I mean, you know, I as anybody else, I love talking about the old times, remembering all the dumb shit we did and whatnot. But, fuck, dude. I mean, I keep remembering Tham falling into that freaking river, dude, and just dunking all the way to the bottom and floating back. And it's like, well, how the fuck do you know, you're on a patrol, dude. You know, you got your eyes on, you know, your killer eyes on, and all of a sudden you fucking just go, you're like, oh, God. But, so obviously now, you know, you're a couple of different things. You're working with Border Patrol, and, you know, that's cool and all that. And I do want to get into that. But what I'm really into is, how did the comic books come into existence for you, my friend?
Comic books have always been a part of my life. Probably till about I was 8 years old. I've always been drawing as long as I can remember. I've always been drawing. And it was mostly superhero stuff. You know, I was influenced by my generation. I was born in the 70s. I was raised in the 80s. I had probably some of the coolest fucking cartoons that had ever been put on the air.
Yeah.
So I was always there. I was, you know, just there drawing superheroes. And I had never picked up a comic book until I was about 8 years old. I got a really bad case of the flu. My dad was in construction. It was the winter. So he was, you know, when it rains, he can't work, you know, because the job sites rained out. So I had a really bad case of the flu. He went to Long's Drugs. I don't even know if those are around anymore. And what I loved about Long's Drugs is that they had the old spinner racks with the comic books all.
Yeah.
So he came home after going to the store because he felt bad for me because I was death wormed over with a stack of fucking comic books. He pulled out every comic book on that spinner rack. And the first one on the top was Daredevil, who ended up becoming my favorite character in any universe ever, you know, because as soon as I start turning the page in it gets into who he is. First of all, like a blind superhero, fucking awesome.
Right.
You know, so that caught my interest. And so I ended up, when I got all healed and back on my feet, I went to the comic book store and I started buying back issues of Daredevil. You know, even if they're reprints, I didn't need originals. You know, I just wanted to know more about the character. And, you know, it's not like today where you just jump on the internet, hop on Wikipedia, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about the character. I mean, I actually had to do research. So, you know, you got this blind kid raised Catholic, and I'm like, holy shit. Well, I'm not blind, but I was raised Catholic, so I can. And there's not a whole lot of superheroes out there that their faith was a big part of who they are. You know, so I really connected with that character, and I've been reading them ever since. So that's how I kind of got into the realm of comic books. But then as I got older and my skill set started progressing, because every kid draws, they get to a point where they just kind of grow out of it. They stop doing it, you know, and I just never stopped. I just kept going and going and going and going and going and going. And, you know, then I started creating characters. And it wasn't like Rocket Man or, you know, some generic ass shit. Like I was actually starting to create some pretty cool stuff. And I was quite pleased with myself. Like Phantom Hawk, I created in detention when I was 12. Nice. You know, I mean, he's obviously evolved since that first, you know, incarnation there. But, he's one of the first, him and Pendragon. And well, a lot of the characters that I've really pushed in my company to be on the forefront and get their books out are characters that I created when I was really young.
Okay.
So, and then it just, I got tired of, I got tired of hearing the question of, hey man, you should make a comic book. When are you going to make a comic book? I'm like, I will one day. Next thing you know, I'm damn near 33 years old and I haven't done shit.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Today's the day. Today's the day I make a comic book. So I told my wife at the time, I was like, hey, I'm going to lock myself in my office for a couple hours. She goes, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. It's just something I got to handle. Mm-hmm. So, and she was actually, the first time she was actually kind of supportive of what I did.
Well,
so I mean, I don't talk ill of her, but I mean, usually she didn't. She thought it was an interesting hobby. She never, really supported it being, a career choice. So I lock myself in the room and I type up a script. It was 24 pages of what I thought was just badassness, and then after that, I printed it out, I stapled it, I sat at my drawing table and I started, laying out the pages, how they were going to look. And that's what started it. And what really kind of solidified everything is I'd already done the second issue. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do a comic book convention. And there was a small one in Sacramento. It was called SatCon. And it was put on by a guy named Jason Dubé. Dubé, I think. Jason, if you're listening and I butchered your last name, I'm sorry. And I sold out. I had printed 50 copies of issue 1 and 50 copies of issue 2, and I sold out. I sold out on the first day. So the second day, I was like, what the fuck am I even doing here? And I had paid for it already covered the table. It covered all kinds of stuff. And I was like, okay, this is going to work. This is what I want to do. I want to do the convention circuit. I want to meet fans. And probably one of the coolest things that had happened was it was on Sunday. And just like any other artist or independent artist at a convention, you have your portfolio laid out. Everything that I've ever drawn in my entire life, whether it was good or not, every scrap of paper that I thought was worthy to put on table, I put in a really nice portfolio jacket and laid it on the table. Well, Tim Bradstreet, I think his first name is Tim, and he's known for doing like the really hyper realistic Punisher covers, late 90s, early 2000s. And he's from Pittsburgh, so he's wearing a Steelers freaking sweatshirt, and I'm a Bengals fan, so I had to talk shit. I didn't know. Here's another thing. I love the anonymity of comics. You can be famous and no one's going to know what you look like.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when Bradstreet comes by and he's flipping through my shit and I'm talking shit about the Steelers, and then he's like, well, who's your fucking team? And I'm like, well, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And he's like, well, your fucking team sucks. I'm like, don't I know it, but I still hate the Steelers. And he goes, yeah, most Bengals fans do. So after he walks off, my buddy that was helping me work the table comes by and he's like, dude, what did he fucking say? And he was like really excited about it. Yeah. Like, what did he say? And I'm like, I don't know. He said, keep up the good work, that I had awesome stuff. And we talked shit about football for a little bit. And he's like, really? Don't you know who that is? And I'm like, no, who the fuck is he? And he's like, dude, that was Bradstreet. And I'm like, fuck. I fucked up. So that's a very long answer to that question of how I got into it. And I've been doing it ever since, I've always looked at my day job as the day job. Even though I am passionate about my day job, I'm even more passionate about making comic books and telling good stories. Especially since most of my comic books have a military connection in some way or form. I love the military community, even my Cran Eaton Marine brothers. So, I try to involve them as much as I can in the story organically if it fits. And then a lot of people that I know personally have ended up being supporting characters in the comic books. Monkey Bane. Yeah, he's one of he's actually a very popular character in my comic books. Him and Felix Gonzalez. So I created these two detectives, you know, and I modeled these two detectives after Gonzo and Fane.
Right.
And I guess I wrote them a little too well, because now I have people come like, hey, when's Downs and Gonzo gonna get their own series? And I'm like, really? They're supporting characters. He's like, yeah, but they're fucking badass. And I'm like, I guess I'll get writing that. I don't know.
For opportunity, that's cool, man. I'll admit, man, I have not been able to keep up with everything that you've been doing. You know, I try to check in as much as I can, you know, when you're doing your live drawings and whatnot. So I'm familiar with some of the characters you're talking about, but I won't feign that, oh, you know, I totally know everything you're saying. But there is somebody that does know that. In fact, we had him on the show last week, was Bryan Buendia. How did you hook up with Bryan for his podcast?
Actually, it was through Facebook, and I think me and Bryan became friends on the Brotherhood of the Blue Cord.
Okay.
I couldn't even tell you what post it was, but it had to be geek related, because that's kind of how we found each other. Because before that, we were just arguing about politics and shit, because he's a little bit of a hippie. Bryan, I love you. Just a little bit. You know, and then we started talking, and he bought everything that I had in the catalog at the time. And he loved what I was doing. You know, he was like, Nick, you know, this is like 90s image stuff. I love it. And I'm like, dude, that's exactly what I was going for. Because I wanted that old school.
I got to tell you, dude, image is what made me start drawing. Like J. Scott Campbell, dude, I saw J. Scott's work and I was like, holy shit. Just gorgeous.
It's so beautiful, and I can't emulate it. I try to do females his way. I mean, even though I'm a huge Jim Lee fan, Jim, if you happen to be watching, sorry, your males are amazing. Your females, I got to give it to J. Scott Campbell.
Right.
Even though Jim Lee has drawn some really beautiful women. I mean, I think I had the X-Men Marvel swimsuit issue in the 90s, right, and those posters were all over my wall. Other kids have like actual model posters, you know, at that age. And I'm like, no. I had like Psylocke in a bikini, like just doing this like bullshit. You know,
I had the 13 swimsuit editions up on my wall too. Bro. Yep, they're hot.
Yeah, but when they all went and created Image, I mean, that blew my damn mind.
Yeah.
You know, I had never been more excited. So I consider myself kind of like an image historian, kind of like, you know, Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead. But he got a lot further with them than I did.
Right.
You know, but how I modeled my company, Apogee Comics, is the original business model for Image Comics. And I learned everything by watching the documentaries. There's tons of documentaries on that company and those guys, you know, the renegades, the rebels, the guys that, you know, completely shook up the comics industry. And the documentary was, you know, appropriately named The Image Revolution, because that's what it was. You know, it brought comics into the mainstream, you know, it just changed the industry forever, good and bad. But
well, I mean, when DC and Marvel saw this upstart company hit as hard as it did, with really well-made characters, well-drawn characters, so much interwoven storyline from the get-go, I mean, it blew my mind. Team 7, you know, connections to Gen 13, connections to all the other groups that were out there, Wildcats, all that stuff.
You find out that Chapel was the one that actually killed Al Simmons, that sent him to hell. You know, it's just it.
Right.
And it was from the very beginning, you know, where DC and Marvel, they didn't do that. Like when they started in the 60s, and well, DC is a little bit older, but when Marvel started in the 60s, they still weren't doing that. They were just scratching the surface on shared universes and crossovers. Right. You know, it wasn't, you know, usually if they did that, it was like in a what if comic book. So
right.
Image just was the game changer, and it revolutionized everything that I'm doing and what any other creator is going to be doing for, you know, as long as there's going to be comics.
Sure. No, I remember because my good friend Tyrone, and myself, we sat down and probably for like 3 or 4 years, we're just developing characters, developing storylines, drawing out stuff and whatnot. And we never took the plunge you did. But I mean, if we would have had, and I'm going off memory now, 20 years plus, but probably minimum 5 different titles with a minimum of a year's worth of storyline for each. And I mean, and it was all Image. I mean, it was all because of Image. Because, I mean, we still read some Marvel comics and some DC stuff. But, I mean, when Image came out, because, I mean, and then there was Dark Horse. I mean, and Dark Horse has come out with some great stuff, too.
Yeah, they have.
Impact, in my opinion, that Image did. I mean...
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, Image definitely was the big dog in the early 90s. And then Valiant had just started out. Yeah. And Valiant's game started, you know, getting ramped up. And then Image and Valiant did the crossover. They did Checkmate or Deathmate. That's what it was called. And dude, I was so happy because right around the corner, they had just opened a comic book shop, you know, when I was growing up. So every new comic book day, my ass was there, you know, trying to pick up that latest issue of Deathmate. And then that brought me into Valiant's comics and their characters. I'm like, who's this Solar character? Who's Exo Man of War? Who's Bloodshot? You know, who's Harbinger? You know, like it was just really cool to see two companies do that. And then I think most of the 90s, my nose was just in a comic book. I don't remember much of what was going on politically or anything else. I just remember that my nose was in a fucking comic book for about 8 years. Like, not a casual reader, like hardcore. That was my life.
Oh, no, I completely understand. Yeah, that's all we did. My buddy and I'd get together, you know, in the evenings, and it would be drawing with Image open over here, DC over there, Marvel, or we'd be talking about, you know, the new, did you see the Transformers today or whatever, you know, whatever happened to be on.
To wrap up that question, like how I met Bryan, I met him on the internet. And that's how I've met a lot of creators and stuff like that. Some of them have actually got a chance to meet face to face. But Bryan came to me and he's like, hey man, I want to do a comic review podcast. And I'm like, fucking aces, dude, do it. He goes, you don't think that? I'm like, yeah, there's tons of people that are reviewing comic books, but it's not a big deal. Go out and do what you want to do. Do what, if you're passionate about doing this, if you really want to have a voice and do it, just the first step is just doing it. You know, it's going to suck. The first couple of times it's going to suck. You're going to learn, you're going to adapt, you're going to evolve, you know, and who knows where it's going to go, but you got to be willing to take the hits. And
you'll never get
and I was like, yeah. And so he's like, well, what should I do? And I'm like, dude, I'll give you access to my catalog. Go nuts. You know, if you want to just review indie books, because there's not a lot of people out there reviewing indie books.
No.
You know, that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds of people out there doing it, but as far as ones that have actually are kind of making a name, you know, maybe 5.
Have you ever heard of a guy called Lord of the Long Box?
Yeah, the name's familiar.
Yeah, well, I don't know how big he is. He's a buddy of mine from back in the day when we were doing the comic books and stuff. That's kind of how I met him too. Great guy. And yeah, I mean, he's probably the only other guy that I know of that I've researched or even looked at even a little bit that's doing comic books and stuff like that. And yeah, most of them are mostly mainstream comics. I don't see a lot of independent stuff being reviewed. And, you know, I think that's a good thing for Bryan. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's, you know, and I've watched a lot of these indie review channels, and it's brought me into picking up those books, you know, and the same thing that like Bryan, he's like, I don't know how I did. I'm like, well, I mean, after your podcast, I mean, it wasn't immediately after, but like a week after, I had a small little uptick in sales, you know, so you have an audience, you know, so just keep going, and I gave him a little bit of advice on some things, and he's following suit, and he's hitting bigger books. He's hitting like DC and Marvel and doing reviews on that. And he's obviously a big fan of the Flash. I'm a big fan of the Flash also. So I've thoroughly enjoyed, you know, watching him build that, you know.
Right.
You know.
So
and then,
if you were gonna
Facebook and I hate his guts sometimes. But.
Well, anybody that goes on there's going to see you and me just taking him to task,
Oh yeah, we completely just hijack the thread, and then, I have a little bit too much to drink, and then I post something, and that starts an argument. I woke up this morning and to a whole bunch of people going like, "That's not really a good way to get fans for your comic book," and I'm like, "Actually, you'd be surprised." I'll lose a couple of fans, but I'll gain at least 20 more followers based off my drunken ramblings and talking shit.
Oh, yeah. People that are into that shit. Well, you know what? We're gonna switch gears one more time. We're gonna move on to the behind the paywall questions here. So we're gonna say goodbye to our good friends on YouTube. If you guys want access to this, please visit me on my Patreon site. You can pay me, and I will then give you access to all the wonderful things that we're going to talk to Nick about next. So
I'm going to tell you, it's awesome. So drop that coin. Toss a coin to your witch.
Woo! All right, guys. So we'll see you later.
Blue Cord Horde Brewing Company, not your mama's coffee.